Well, there's been a lot of talk about domestic violence over the last few years. And we all know, as women, if the relationship you're in becomes abusive, just leave. Leave the relationship. Where do you go if you're in a foreign country? What are you going to do? Where are you going to find help? Who's going to help you?
Hi, I'm Jane.
Hello, I'm Anita Gera, co-founder of Hague Explained CIC.
And I'm Bex.
And we are
Insightful Sisters.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this evening's episode. Last year, we interviewed Ruth from Hague Mothers, and there was such a positive and interested response to that we thought it was time to look into that topic again. So we're really lucky tonight. We've got Anita here from Hague Explained. So Anita, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about you, about Hague Explained. How did you get into this?
Yes, thank you, Jane. Thank you so much to you and Bex for inviting me to join you on this podcast. We really appreciate it. Hague Explained is a non-profit, a community interest company that Sarah, another Hague mother, and I founded a couple of years ago now. We started Hague Explained because we realised that although some organisations such as Filia Hague Mothers, the wonderful legacy project that Ruth is in charge of, were doing great work in getting people together to talk about what the Hague Convention is and what needs to be done to improve the way mothers especially are treated. There was nobody in particular working on raising awareness. And we thought, as a very small startup community interest company, a non-profit, our chances of getting enough impact, enough attention to actually work on changing how the law is treated, even domestically, were minimal. So what we could do instead was to raise awareness of what the Hague Abduction Convention is, how it works and who it mostly traumatizes and who it helps. By raising awareness and getting people to talk about it, we're hopeful that we can actually help families avoid falling into the trap of ending up in a Hague Convention case.
I know Bex is going to ask you in more detail about exactly what your organisation does in a moment. Could you just give us in very, very briefly what exactly the Hague Convention is?
Yes, of course. Well, it's an international law, basically, that was drafted in the late 1970s and first signed in October 1980. Now, as many of us are aware, if you look back to the late 70s and early 80s, the world was a very, very different place. And people started noticing, especially judges and politicians started noticing, that there was a bit of a problem that mothers were meeting foreign gentlemen and starting families with them. So, for example, if we look at the UK, we might think a nice British mum might meet a foreign gentleman who was maybe here for a short period, studying, working, or might go abroad and meet someone, come back, start a family with children. They'd get to the point when children were a bit older, they've been working hard, and the father might say, look, I'll take the children back to see my family this summer. Why don't you have a week or so to yourself, see your friends, spend time with your family, and I'll take the kids for a week or 10 days to see the grandmother, my mother. And the mothers would think, wow, how wonderful. And off he'd go. And the thing is, then he would say, I'm never going to bring them back. And this was happening rather too frequently. So this law was designed to make sure that the children came back to their place of habitual residence, which was never actually defined in law, but where they had been living. And of course, the idea was they would be returned to their mother, their primary caregiver. And the father would be encouraged to come with them and return to the country, because too often the children were actually being taken for not very positive reasons. So, for example, they might be taken so that they would be forced to participate in religious ceremonies that the mother might not approve of or agree with. They might be taken for forced marriage in some cultures, younger children, prepubescent or pubescent children, or of course FGM, female genital mutilation. So the reasons why the children were not coming home was not good. And under the terms of this law, their aim was to return the children within 6 weeks, so really quickly. So there was no time to look into why they were away. It was just quick, get them back.
Yeah.
That was
great. That sounds good.
Yes. Wonderful.
What's the problem?
Yeah, so it was a law dealing with abduction, so parental abduction, which of course is very different from kidnapping. In kidnapping, there are threats and people ask for money and that sort of thing. And we're talking about abduction, which is usually a family, a parental figure taking the children to another jurisdiction. And retention, so you're away with permission, as many of these fathers were, take the children to see your parents and your family. So there's the permission, but then retention is keeping the child there longer than was first agreed. The problem today is the world has changed. As we know, global mobility is now a huge industry in itself. People move around the world far more easily and quickly. People look for jobs abroad. Medics, journalists, academics often move country to country with their families for a year or 2 or 3 and then come home. Large corporates will send valued executives to work abroad to start up a branch in another country, for example. And if the executive is lucky, they'll get promised things like, we'll pay for your partner, your children to all go with you, we'll rent you a beautiful place to live, we'll pay for private healthcare, we'll offer private education for the children, and we'll fly you all home once a year or more often, depending on the position. It sounds wonderful. It's a dream come true for many. Let's go and live in Australia for a year or 2, or Spain or Peru. Anyway, very exciting. Now, the problem is now there are 103 signatories to the convention. So that's most countries you've ever visited or thought about working in will be signatories. Generally, it's now the mothers who are the victims, who are being affected by this law. So the mother is taking the child to another country, usually her home country. She's not just going somewhere random. She's taking the child or children to her home country and then not returning to where they were living. Now you've got to ask yourself, Jane, why would a mother who's presumably reasonably settled in a foreign country with a foreign partner suddenly up sticks and take the child and return home to her home country? Well, there's been a lot of talk about domestic violence over the last few years. And we all know, as women, if the relationship you're in becomes abusive, just leave. Leave the relationship. Where do you go if you're in a foreign country? What are you going to do? Where are you going to find help? Do you have financial support? Do you have psychological, emotional support? Who's going to help you? So, of course, the mother wants to come home. And that's where fathers are using the Hague Convention now to get those children sent straight back to them. And in the latest statistics, 73% of the cases are now against mothers.
So you're describing a situation where a mother fleeing domestic violence, for example, is penalised. And I believe that your interest in this came about through your own experiences. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. That's absolutely true, Jane. And I'd like to just point out that it's not just mothers fleeing domestic abuse, domestic violence, whatever form it takes. Many of us also return home with permission. So remember, it's the Hague Abduction Convention, but it deals with abduction and retention. So you take the children home with permission from the father and you think, maybe we're going to be safe. But of course, the father then has the right to change his mind within a time frame of 12 months, 365 days. And many of us find, as I did in my own case, that after 11 months, where you think you're fairly settled back home with your children, after 11 months, suddenly there's a Hague Convention case. Now, most of us have no idea what this means. Nobody's ever heard of the Hague Convention. And this is why we set up Hague Explained, so that when something like this happens, God forbid it does happen to any of our listeners or anybody we know, you at least have some idea of what it is and how to look for help and support. Because when it happened to us, we had no idea. And we didn't realise that it'd be so quick and the children would be forced to return. And of course, generally the mother goes with them, whether it's been a case of fleeing domestic abuse or leaving with permission and then not going home immediately when the father says, I've changed my mind. So you did just allude to my own position, Jane. And yes, I was given permission to return to the UK with my 2 children. So we're all British citizens. I was told in writing to rent a house, to enroll the children in school. I was told in writing to tell the government that I was a separated mother, so basically a single mother with 2 children, so that I could get benefits, support from the government, financial support, because of course the father refused to give us any financial support. When we returned to the UK, we would come back every summer, and I always had to fend for myself and hope that my parents would help us, because we were not allowed to have any money out of the United States, which is the country we've been living in. So the mothers, yes, are returned very quickly, because most mothers don't want the children to go on their own. They want to go with them.
Yeah, of course. So you were in a situation where your children were forcibly returned and you were either forced to go there, and you go there as a non-citizen, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the children will be forcibly returned if the mother refuses to take or send them. I went with my children, so the court staff didn't have to intervene and basically abduct my children. So I returned with the children, and of course then you land up in a family court case in that other country. So you're in court. The Hague case is usually in your home country, if that's where you've taken the children. So in my case, example, come back to the UK with my children. We'd been here in the end 16 and a half months. So my children were extremely well settled. They'd been in school well over an academic year, lots of friends, seeing family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins weekly, joining local cricket club, the drama club, very well settled. And then suddenly it was ordered that they had to return to the United States. Of course, I went with them. And I was then in a family court case, which started less than 24 hours after we got off the plane. Although I'd been promised that, of course, that couldn't possibly happen. Nothing could be filed until I was safely there and had time to find my own lawyer. But that was something called an undertaking. It's a promise that the other parent can make to the court. I promised to support you financially. I promised to provide you with a vehicle. I promised to let the children stay with you, of course. I promised not to start anything in court until you're there. I promised not to be at the airport when you land because I don't want to intimidate anyone. All those promises, undertakings, absolutely worthless. Also, orders of protection. As mothers, we soon find out, apart from the undertakings being worthless, the court ordered order of protection, which you think will help you, just doesn't.
I'm so sorry. I mean, you must have felt powerless.
Absolutely, yes. And you realise that there is no justice. Nobody is going to listen to you. You start off thinking, well, of course, I'll just explain what's happened. I'll show the proof I've got that he wrote to me and said, yes, go. My ex-husband was a commercial pilot. So he bought the tickets for us. He visited us several times in the UK. It's not as if he didn't know where we were. He was very well aware of where we were. And I had all this evidence, but they didn't want to listen to it. They didn't care. You realise you are absolutely powerless. You are a foreigner. You're treated as a criminal. You have this label, Hague abduction, over your head. You might as well have it tattooed onto your forehead. I am an abductor. I'm a child abductor. People you thought were your friends will go, oh my God, you're a child abductor, if they don't really know you. And of course, in court, the judges and the court staff and most of the lawyers look at you and go, bad, bad, bad. You're obviously a terrible mother. You're a child abductor. You abducted this child. How could you? How evil.
It's just tragic. And in your situation, were you able to stay there and work and see them? And how does that work? Can you?
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good question. It's different, obviously, for every case. Every mother, depending on which country she's been in, whether or not she had residency, perhaps even had citizenship, whether she had a work visa, it will depend on those individual circumstances. Many of the mothers find that they cannot stay in that foreign country, even though their children have to, and they return home, needing the support to find that they might not see their children again for many years, perhaps ever. So in my own case, I had what's known as a green card. I had permission to live and work in the United States. I didn't have citizenship because my ex had always refused to allow me to apply for that. But I had permission to stay. However, I had no money. I had no credit score. I had no work history. I had no financial support. I had very little emotional support. I didn't know how I was going to stay. I didn't have healthcare. I wouldn't have been able to afford to run a vehicle. I didn't know what kind of job I could have got quickly to help support myself. I had some healthcare needs, so getting health insurance would have been incredibly expensive. And I just realised there was no way I could stay. I had to return home because at least at home I could get healthcare. The NHS, so it may have, is still better than having nothing. And my family, friends, support were all here. My work history meant that my qualifications mean something in Europe. In the United States, they didn't. So I had to return. To cut a very long story short, the family court case ended up being completely in my ex-husband's favour. The only positive note was the divorce was finalised, but everything was given to him. We had joint custody, but the judge, in her wisdom, wrote that if we couldn't agree on anything such as education, religion, healthcare, then he would have the final say. So he very quickly sent me an email and said, I'm not going to discuss anything with you because I have the final say. So I'm just going to make every decision and there's nothing you can do. Yeah. So I did return. That was on the understanding that I would get to see my children for 12 weeks every year. Having been their primary caregiver and sole caregiver most of the time. Remember, he was a commercial pilot. He was out of state for 5 nights of the week, even when we lived in the United States together as a family. And of course, the 16 and a half months here in England, I was completely on my own. But suddenly I was allowed to see my children for 12 weeks of the year, which was the school holidays, so summer, Easter and Christmas holidays only. I came back to the UK. I was homeless for the first 12 months. I wasn't sleeping rough, fortunately. I had enough friends and family members who could always offer me a spare bed or a sofa. But I was homeless for a year. I ended up on universal credit for 4 years when I returned. So I was completely broke. I was broke and homeless. I could have still supported my children when they came to visit because we've got friends and family that would have given us a place to stay. I had friends who would have lent me a car. They would have fed us, they would have looked after us. I couldn't afford to go to the United States. And if I had been able to afford it, I would have had to provide accommodation for the 3 of us. I have 2 children. So accommodation, entertainment, because it was school holidays, food, healthcare. I would have needed transport. They lived in Phoenix, Arizona. The nearest bus stop was about 3 miles from their home. So being without a vehicle is incredibly difficult, if not impossible. And I just couldn't afford it. So I wrote to my ex and said, please send them to me here, which is what the court had agreed. I had to give a $20,000 bond to see my children in the UK as insurance that I wouldn't keep them here. And I had friends and family who offered to lend me that money as necessary. But he said no. He said, no, you can only see them here. I'm not going to allow them to travel to the United Kingdom again. And he didn't. So I couldn't afford to go and see them. After a few years, when I finally got back on my feet a bit and started earning a little bit of money, I could have saved up and gone. But then I became very afraid of what he would do if he saw me starting to be happy again with my children. He tried very hard to sever all the bonds. In the beginning, I didn't get to speak to them very much. Even when I was in Phoenix, I didn't get to see them very often. When I returned to the UK, I phoned every day and left a message on the landline, on the home phone. It cost me a fortune. I was on universal credit and most of my money was going to phone bills. This was in the day before WhatsApp and before everyone had free phone calls. My children later told me after about a year and a half or so, when I had free communications with them, they didn't know I'd ever rang. As far as they knew, I'd never bothered to try and contact them. They'd never had one of my messages.
It's just, I can't imagine what you've been through. I mean, it's just dreadful. I'm going to pass across to Bex because I'm aware she's got some questions about the organisation, but perhaps we can talk later about what the next part of your story is, if you like.
Yes, of course. Hi, Bex.
So I suppose a good place to start is with you starting the Hague Explained CIC. How did you first meet Sarah?
Online. There's actually a large network of us mothers who've been through Hague cases around the world. And over the last 10 or 11 years, I've been in contact with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mothers around the world who've been through these cases or are facing these cases or feel threatened by these cases. So Sarah and I met online and then we met in person as we were quite close to each other physically. She actually gave me a room in her house for over 3 months. So she really helped save my life by giving me somewhere to stay. She's the most wonderful woman. And after a few years of working with other mothers, starting a charity, working with charities, we realized that we believed we could have the most effect by helping to raise awareness, by putting all our efforts into raising awareness so that families, mothers would be forewarned. Forewarned is forearmed, and they wouldn't slip into the trap of making the mistakes that could give rise to a Hague Convention case.
So you started Hague Explained. And I mean, one of the things that you do that I find particularly interesting is that you offer corporate trainings. Tell us a bit about how you sort of came up with the different ways in which you sort of raise awareness, train, reach people.
Well, we've been working to try and keep improving that for the last couple of years. The corporate training, we offer interactive workshops that we can tailor to any client who would like to order one. I've got a background in education. I've worked in corporate training, actually, for decades. I'm still a university lecturer at several universities. I guest lecture at other universities now as well. I've worked in universities in 3 or 4 different countries, as well as, I said, of offering corporate training. So I have a background in education. And I've developed, with the help of several other mothers, a basic package that we can then tailor to whichever company needs the information depending on their circumstances and the sort of people they'd like to inform. We also do as much work as we can with media. We do as much as we can with webinars and podcasts if possible, so that we'll get more listeners who will be aware of what we're doing. We have leaflets and flyers. We've got a website and we encourage everyone to talk about it. We've been very fortunate. We've got some amazing contacts in Southampton, working with the law school and the legal clinic of the University of Southampton. We also work closely with UCL, with the Disaster and Risk Department, and the volunteers that we get, the student volunteers, they're all absolutely fired up. They all want to know, they want to understand how this could possibly happen, because this doesn't fit in with their understanding of how the law should work to protect people and what the just world is. So you really quickly lose your just world belief once you start to understand how the Hague Convention works, sadly.
I know when we did our episode last year, I think we were both shocked that this information isn't readily available in every domestic violence charity.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's a really important point, Vexa. That is so important, because we do work closely with charities as well. And we've worked with Ruth Deneen of Filia Hague Mothers to develop a workshop for charities as well, which we've delivered to charities across Europe, together with Ruth and Christina from Filia Hague Mothers, because they don't know. So we want these charities to understand, if they get a mother in front of them who could possibly be faced with a Hague Convention case, even if it hasn't happened yet, they need to know and be aware and alert to that. So I remember in my own case, I was advised to talk to Women's Aid, which I did. Women's Aid offered me a place in a refuge. They said, we'll take you and your children into a refuge. You'll be safe. We'll keep you safe. The police who I went to at one point said, set up an escape plan where you could go with your children. Don't tell us where it is, because if we get a court order, we'd have to disclose it. So just have a plan of where you can go to be safe, should you need to. What nobody understood was, once a Hague Convention case starts, that is an international law. It trumps those domestic laws and regulations. So you might try and keep you safe. The police talked about a lives with order, a residence order, that sort of thing, and an order of protection to keep him away. But it's an international law. So all of that is completely pointless. And had they given me a place in a refuge, had we gone, the police would have been forced to disclose where we were living. And the court case, the Hague Convention case, would have still taken place, and the results would have been the same. The children would have had to return, despite the fact that we might have been in a refuge because of domestic abuse. So it's a very good point.
Yeah, that's such essential work and such an important message to get out there for women in those situations. You've mentioned that you have quite a few volunteers and a lot are going down a legal background. Tell us, who typically is drawn to this, and what sort of projects have you got overall?
Right. Well, we've got students from all the different years, some of them just starting their studies, some of them are almost at the end of it. As I said, a lot of them are law school students. So we've got contacts with the Global Legal Clinic at the University of Southampton, which is an amazing legal clinic offering pro bono help to people who need legal advice. And I was invited by the director to speak to volunteers, to the student volunteers. And that's where a lot of the volunteers for Hague Explained came. They'd heard me speak at the university, and they ran a fundraiser for us last year, which we're incredibly grateful for. And that meant we were on campus, we could give out our leaflet to a lot of students as they walked past us. And we've since had a lot of other students get in touch and say, wow, we didn't know about this. What is this Hague Convention? We've looked at your website, we've looked at your Instagram posts. We want to learn more, we want to help. How can we help? We've got students from UCL as well. I guest lecture there every year. And they've got an amazing professor who teaches them about the Hague Convention and how it so negatively impacts mothers and children. And we get them getting in touch with us and asking to help. So we've had students who've done research for us, who've helped with writing reports, who've helped design leaflets, who run the social media accounts, who started up an Instagram account for us. They do research into funding we could look at, and they're always looking for new opportunities for us, which is really amazing.
I think that's so excellent. Is there anything else important that we should know?
Keep your ears peeled, eyes peeled. I can never remember which way around it goes. Keep your ears open and your eyes peeled. I think we're hoping to be able to announce an event either later this year or early next year. So follow us on Instagram, follow us on X or Twitter, have a look at our website. We're on LinkedIn as well. We've got a company page, and we hope to be able to announce an event soon. Yeah, I won't say any more. I don't want to jinx it.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bex.
I imagine that when people contact you, the mothers themselves must need a lot of support. Do you get a lot of that sort of contact?
Yes, Jane. We do get mothers contacting us and asking for help and support. We're not a frontline service. We don't offer direct support. We organise, we create and workshops to help people understand and disseminate information to help people understand, talk to the press. But of course, when mothers do get in touch with us, We've got a large network of other mothers that we know and a large network of volunteers, and we try and find someone who could help personally, privately. We can't do it under our banner, unfortunately. And of course, Filia Hague Mothers is a great place to go as well. We often get help there and send mothers there, or they send mothers to us when they meet mothers who need more personal support.
Are the women affected across a range of countries? Are there some countries that are particularly unfriendly for women in this situation?
I would say there are 103 countries in the world that are unfriendly to women in this situation, because it's just about all of them, unfortunately. It's a really small niche issue, actually, which is probably why it's so hard to raise awareness. There are approximately 3,500, well under 4,000 cases a year worldwide. So in the UK, for example, it's about 10%, so 350, 375 cases a year, which is nothing. This is why nobody's really interested in it. And the US has the largest number of cases. Other countries in which there are more cases are Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Germany. So the larger countries, they do have more cases, but of course they have larger populations. And as for which countries are the worst, the United States is hard because abduction, that word abduction, is a felony, so a crime in the United States. The Hague Abduction Convention is specifically a civil law. It's not supposed to be used for criminal cases. But the minute you're in the US, when you've got that label of abductor on your head, a lot of people will try and push it towards criminal cases because it is seen as a crime. In this country as well, Jane, there are two laws here which are very targeted against mothers and very, very bad for the mothers. There's the 1983 or 84 Child Abduction Act, which criminalises child abduction. So in general, in the UK, it's been Hague abduction cases, which are civil. But now we see that more and more mothers are being targeted using the Child Abduction Act, which makes them criminal. And there are mothers in prison. Having tried to protect their children, they are now in prison. And unfortunately, the new law that's been going through Parliament, the Crime and Policing Bill, has a little paragraph just somewhere in the middle, paragraph 104, I think it is, which would criminalise retention. So that would mean in cases like my own, my ex-husband called me up after cutting all contact for almost 2 months. He suddenly got in touch and said, "I'm back. The children can come home now. You can come back next week." And I said, "Well, they're at school. Let's at least wait till the end of the school term. Actually, better the school year. Let's wait till the summer and then come home." And he said, "No, you've got to come back now." I said, "Well, we've got to talk about it. We're parents. Let's discuss this. We don't just say to the children, we're going back today. That's not how things should work." And that's when he started and filed a Hague Convention case. So in my own case, the minute I didn't jump high enough onto a plane and return immediately, under the terms of this new proposed law, I could have been criminalised. And then that would be up to 7 years in prison, just because I didn't say yes immediately.
You're describing a controlling relationship, aren't you?
Absolutely, yes, coercively controlling relationship. I mean, all the experiences we hear about from so many mothers, the narcissistic, abusive men who've used coercive control tactics on them, usually for many, many years, cutting them off from family and friends in many cases, and all the forms of domestic abuse that we see and hear about, and that we've also experienced. My ex was arrested in this country for raping me, but once we got back to the United States, of course, the case was dropped. There was no evidence. We weren't even in the country. And so in the States, they just laughed and said, obviously, it was nothing.
I'm so sorry that you've had to experience that.
Thank you.
So what happened in the end with your case? Were you able to bring your children back or find a way of being with them?
No. To cut a long, complicated and rather awful story short, it's now been 10.5 years since I last saw my children. August the 3rd, 2015 is when I last saw them.
I'm
Not
so
been
sorry.
allowed to even see them since then. Thank you. Yeah. I'm an adult. I can find support. I can go out and talk to people, find support. I've educated myself. I've earned myself a master's degree in women and child abuse because I felt I needed to understand what all this was about. I did research. My dissertation was primary research based on working with other mothers in similar situations to my own who'd lost custody of their children to work out what could be done to really help them. So I've been able to try and understand and work out how to survive all of this. My children, as young children, have lost everything. They lost their mother, their primary caregiver. They lost their maternal family. They've lost their heritage, the maternal heritage. They've lost their languages. I used to speak to them a little bit in Hindi, in German, in French. All of that's gone. Now they are American, and they're seen, their father was African American, so they are half Black African American. I'm half Indian, so they're 25% Indian and 25% white British. They've lost so much heritage, so much of that rich heritage. We used to speak Hindi, as I said. We celebrated all the Indian festivals together, as well as the Western European ones. I taught them to be proud of their heritage. They were both born in Germany and have German citizenship as well as British and American. And they used to always talk about the fact that they were German as well as everything else. And now that's all gone.
Yeah, I can't imagine what you and the other mothers have gone through, and we thank you so much for doing it. And I can see that your venture to go into other organisations and explain exactly how this works, that's such an excellent idea. You've turned your pain and sorrow into something very productive and optimistic, I suppose.
Well, thank you. Yes, I hope so. I mean, I found my research for my master's, as I said, was with other mothers in a similar situation. So I really speak with the voice of 32 mothers, not just my own. And one of the things I found, what helps the most for all of us, is raising awareness. And it's a thing that really helps. We want people to understand what's happened to us and to avoid it for all the other families and mothers and children out there. I actually boiled it down to 5 things that really help us. And one of the other things that's really important is peer support. So once we get in contact with other mothers who've got this experience, it just makes the world of difference talking to someone who really understands and believes you, believes everything you say. Because generally, when we talk about this, most people will go, well, no. Most cases, mothers always get the children. The children always live with mothers. And then you can see their faces, their eyes change. If you didn't get custody of your child, that means you must have done something really, really bad. You must be one of those really evil mothers that we read about sometimes in papers. And we're not. We just had the misfortune to land up in a Hague Convention case and then in family court cases abroad. And our children were removed from us and given to our abusers. But that is so little known, so little talked about, that the majority of people just find it really hard to believe because they say, I've never heard about this. It can't be true.
It's just tragic.
And so that's our job now, to make sure that nobody's in that position where they're saying, no, that can't be true. I've never heard of it. It should be, oh, I have heard of things like this happening before. How awful.
Yeah. And as when we spoke to Ruth, this law that was brought in to help mothers turned against them and used against them. It's tragic. So thank you so much for all you do for all those women out there. I think we'll go over to Bex and she can ask our last question.
Thank you.
I've got another question that I'd like to ask first, really. I'm just curious if you ever hear stories or meet mothers on the other side of the coin. I mean, the reasons that the Hague Convention was made are still very present in our society. There are still, fathers taking their children home for these reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, is this convention functioning well for mothers on the other side of the coin that are trying to use it to protect their children?
It can, but if you look at the statistics, as I said, it's over 73% of the cases are against mothers. But I have talked to a few mothers for whom it has worked. Fortunately, just because a Hague Convention case works and brings your children back doesn't mean it's the end of it. As anyone who's got any experience of family court will know, you will still end up in family court. There will still be a custody battle. There might be, I know one mother who won her case and now has to pay for the father to come back, to fly back to this country once a month to see the child. So she's got that cost that she has to bear every month. So the mother will have to make every accommodation to make sure that the father, her abuser, is present in the child's life and is seeing the child regularly. Very often it will be shared custody. She will be responsible financially for many things. And also the father might indulge in what we know as lawfare, going back to court again and again and again, filing case after case after case, so that it's never, ever finished. And I have friends in this country who've not been through Hague cases, but they've lost their children to their abusers, who still drags them back to court every couple of months, another hearing about something else. So it doesn't finish. There are deep-set problems in the legal system across every country I've ever heard about, really.
Absolutely. The misogyny is quite often baked into the system in any country, and it's catastrophic when you layer this on top of it, I think.
Absolutely. And I would actually call this, it's a subset of misogyny, and I call it misometry. The miso still meaning hate, and matry as in maternal. So hatred of the mother. It's so obvious in so many cases when you start looking at what's happening in family courts around the world. And Hague cases generally lead to a family court case. And it's just misometry, the hatred of the mother. The father, for some reason, want to destroy the mothers completely and destroy their bond with their children. And one of the things that some of us are the most afraid of, and it's what I was most afraid of, is misometristic filicide. So you've heard of revenge filicide? It's not revenge because we haven't done anything. There's nothing to get revenge for. All we've done is say, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. And for that, we're afraid that he might end up killing the child, because what better way of making sure that a mother never sees her child again? And my ex promised me he would make sure I would never see my children again. So far, he's succeeded. And it's one of the reasons I didn't go back when I could have afforded it, because I thought, if he sees me having that happiness of seeing my children again, what's he going to do to make sure that never happens to me again, to make me happy again? I was very afraid for their lives. And I'm not the only one who has that fear.
No, I can understand that. Anita, thank you so much. And as ever, we finish on a final question, which is to ask for your woman of the moment. It sounds like you're surrounded by some incredibly brave and strong women. So who do you pick, or who would you like to shout out?
Yes, I am surrounded by so many. I think, can I choose two? I would choose my business partner, Sarah, because she is now experiencing, it's intergenerational trauma. It's into the third generation for her, and she's still suffering under the after effects of her Hague case. So she really is amazing how she copes with everything. And also one of the first interviewees you had, amazing woman in Paris, Isabelle Tillieu, the lawyer. She's just incredible. And every time I speak to her, she lifts me up. She gives me new ideas and new hope. She's not a Hague mother, but she's such a strong, amazing woman. And I learned so much from her. So thank you.
We do love her. We do. Well, thank you so much, Anita. Those are, both very worthy picks.
Oh, it's lovely to hear a shout out for both Sarah and Isabel.
Yes.
I can understand both those picks, definitely.
Thank you.
It's been such a privilege to speak to you, and I am so sorry for what you've had to go through.
Thank you. Well, it's really been my honour to be here talking to both of you. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you to our listeners. We really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, please do like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff to help keep our channel growing and spread the word. Thank you.